what was the writing process like for you?
Well, that's an interesting question, Esther. I think that, as I said in my earlier, when I answered your first question, I think it helped me bring my two selves together. I have them very separate, so that even when I speak, even now, you know, when I speak in English, I have one tone of voice. When I speak in Spanish, I have another tone of voice. I was recently translating one of the chapters for a magazine here in Chile, and I had to rewrite the whole chapter because it's so different. Writing in Spanish is so different from English, from writing in English. So I would say that the process of writing in English was a tremendous process, learning process for me, because I had been writing in Spanish for the last 40 years, mostly psychoanalytic articles, and not literary or literary nonfiction as this genre is called. So I would say that the first learning process that I had was to write a book that was not an article, that was a full-length book that was in English, and also that was literary, that was in the genre of literature. That was one of the things that the writing process did for me. The other, I mean, it's a tremendous, I just would like to add that it's really a tremendous boon to be able to learn something that's so difficult at this stage in life.
Yes.
It really, you know, it puts together the synapses of a lot of neurons that are probably were petering out. They came to life again. I felt like I came to life again in this learning process. It was like learning to play the piano. If I had known how to play it when I was a kid and learning how to play it again. So that was wonderful. The other thing that the learning process did for me was that I identified with my father. All my life, I heard, if I would ask him a question in the morning, he would say, "Not now, I'm thinking." I always had the feeling that his mind was somewhere else. Again, going back to the title in another place. His work was the most important thing. Writing was the most important thing for him. I mean, we were very important. His personal life was very important, but number one, and we all knew it, and I've spoken to other daughters of famous writers, they all had the same sensation, they all felt the same, they all lived through the same, Alexandra Styron, Jana Malamud, Kaylee Jones. They always, number one, was my father is a writer and his work is the most important thing. So one of the things that I learned writing this book was that I was thinking when people would interrupt me, either my husband or a phone call, or I had to see a patient or whatever, it's like, please don't interrupt me, I'm thinking. So he came back to me with that feeling of just like this purpose that I had of, and being totally obsessed with what I was doing, which grew, by the way, with time. In the beginning, it was something that I was doing playfully, and then after a while, I became obsessed with it and going over and over and over again what I had written and thinking about it and thinking of the words and how would these words sound better, how to take out all the which, that, it's, because, ands, and turn it around and do something, write it in a different way. So I was able to understand how he felt. And I think that helped me make my peace with him, you know, again, because that had already happened years before, but this was another stepping stone. And I think that also it was a grieving process. When you write a memoir, any kind of memoir about your parents, I think, and they're dead, both of them have passed away. It doesn't matter if they died 5 years ago or 20 years ago. As a matter of fact, my father had been dead, let's see, 8 years when I started writing it. And I thought that the grieving process was over, but actually it wasn't. I was able to sort of recapture him. I was able to bring him to life and then put him to rest. And I remember writing that last chapter of his death, which the book ends with his death. Every time I wrote, I rewrote. When I wrote it, I cried. When I rewrote it, I cried. Every time I read it, I get teary and choked up. But I think that the bottom line is that I laid him to rest. And I could say the same thing about my mother, because my mother died while I was in the process of writing the book. And I felt that I wanted to pay homage to her as well, even though the book was basically about my relationship with Dad. She was a very important person in my life. So I have a few chapters in which she, of course, she's in them, but I wanted a special chapter for her. So in the chapter about Mexico and my life in Mexico, I have a section about the piano, because she was a very good piano player, excellent, and she even wanted to be a pianist. So I wrote about the sensations I had when she was playing the piano when I was a little girl, and how I would sit at her feet and ask her always to play the Brahms lullaby, and always end up burst into tears. And I would always end up bursting into tears. And she would stop and say, "Susie, you want me to stop?" And I'd say, no, please go on. And it forced me, writing about that, forced me to think about, why did I cry? You know, she would ask me, "Why did you cry?" I'd say, "Because it's such a sad song." But that wasn't the reason I was crying. I mean, I was crying because there was something so powerful about her when she played the piano, that she let me into this intimate contact with her, that I think that I picked up on that even as a 6-year-old or a 5-year-old, and burst into tears, because I saw her as such a vulnerable, special, and sensitive woman. Whereas in daily life, she was a very practical person, no nonsense kind of person. So I would say that all these things are my takeaways from writing the book.